Every crime leaves a trail of evidence. Every criminal leaves a trace. This is Felonies Uncovered.
We see what we want to see. It makes us feel safe, ignoring all the rest, safe in our own little echo chamber, just reflecting what we already believe.
Every investigation begins with a search for answers. What happened? Who was involved? Where does the evidence lead? But every investigation has another factor that is often overlooked: the human mind. People do not examine information from a completely empty perspective. We bring our experiences, our beliefs, our fears, and our expectations with us. Sometimes those things help us understand the world, but sometimes they can influence what we see. This is called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for information that supports what we already believe while ignoring information that challenges us. It affects everyone: investigators, journalists, online communities, and everyday people. The danger begins when we create a conclusion before we have all the facts. Once we believe we know the answer, we may start looking for evidence that confirms our belief instead of evidence that reveals the truth. In criminal investigations, that difference can have serious consequences. Because justice is not about proving what we think happened. Justice is about discovering what actually happened. In this episode of Felonies Uncovered in Depth, we examine how confirmation bias shapes the way people interpret evidence, respond to tragedy, and search for answers. Because finding the truth requires more than collecting information. It requires the courage to question our own assumptions. In 2026, the death of Nolan Wells captured national attention. A young college athlete disappeared during a trip to Mississippi's Gulf Coast. After his body was discovered, questions surrounding the circumstances led to widespread public discussion and a search for answers. Like many tragedies, the case created a powerful emotional response. People wanted to understand what happened. They wanted answers. They wanted to know the truth. But when information is incomplete, the human brain naturally tries to fill in the gaps. We look for patterns. We create explanations. We search for meaning in situations that are difficult to understand. And this is where confirmation bias can appear. People may begin with a theory about what happened, then search for information that supports that theory.
Let's find some facts that I already agree with.
A detail that fits the belief feels important. A detail that challenges the belief may be questioned or dismissed. This does not mean asking questions is wrong. Questions are an important part of finding the truth. The challenge is making sure those questions are guided by evidence instead of assumptions. The purpose of examining this case is not to decide the outcome. It is to understand something bigger about human behavior. How do people respond when the truth is unclear? How do emotions influence the way we interpret information? And how can we make sure our search for answers does not become a search for confirmation? Every investigation requires patience. A theory can begin a conversation, but only evidence should determine the conclusion, because the goal is not to find the answer we expect. The goal is to discover the truth. People do not view events from an empty perspective. Every person brings something with them: their experiences, their history, their understanding of the world, and those things can influence how they interpret new information. Psychologists call this top-down processing. The brain uses past experiences and existing knowledge to help make sense of what we see. Most of the time, this ability is helpful. It allows us to recognize patterns and make decisions quickly. But it can also create blind spots. When people have experienced injustice or have seen patterns of unfair treatment throughout history, those experiences can influence how they approach new situations. For many Black Americans, conversations about justice are connected to generations of experiences involving discrimination, unequal treatment, and moments where communities felt their concerns were ignored. That history shapes trust. It shapes concerns. And it shapes how some people respond when difficult questions arise. Understanding that history is important, but understanding psychology is important too. Because confirmation bias can affect everyone. It can influence people who believe something wrong happened. It can influence people who believe something was misunderstood. It can influence investigators, the media, online communities, and the public. The challenge is finding balance, recognizing concerns while still following evidence. acknowledging history while still demanding facts. Because justice cannot be built only on assumptions, it must be built on a commitment to truth. And finding the truth requires something difficult from all of us: the willingness to examine information honestly even when it challenges what we believe. The internet has changed the way people investigate stories. Today, anyone with a computer or a phone can research information, analyze details, and share their thoughts with the world. Online communities can compare timelines. They can study videos. They can examine documents. And they can bring attention to cases that may have received little public notice. This new era has created a different kind of investigator, the internet detective. But with this new power comes a new challenge: speed. Online discussions often move faster than official investigations. A theory can spread around the world before all the facts are known. A rumor can become accepted as truth, and a piece of information can be shared thousands of times before anyone confirms whether it is accurate. This is where confirmation bias can become amplified. People may gather around a shared belief. Then every new detail is judged by whether it supports that belief. Information that fits the theory is shared. Information that challenges the theory may be ignored. This does not mean online discussions are always harmful. They can bring awareness. They can encourage important questions. They can help people search for answers. But there is a responsibility that comes with seeking the truth. Curiosity must be balanced with patience. Questions must be balanced with evidence. Because an investigation is not about proving a theory right. It is about discovering what actually happened. A theory can start a conversation, but evidence must guide the conclusion. Because in the search for justice, the loudest voice is not always the most accurate one. The truth is found by following the facts. One of the hardest things for human beings to do is admit that we might be wrong. Our beliefs can become connected to our identity. They can become connected to our experiences, our communities, and the way we understand the world. So when new information challenges those beliefs, it can feel uncomfortable. The brain naturally wants consistency. It wants answers that make sense. But true critical thinking requires something different. It requires the ability to ask, "What if I am wrong?" That question is one of the most important tools against confirmation bias. A strong investigator does not only look for evidence that supports a theory. They also search for evidence that could challenge it. They ask, "What information would change my mind? What possibilities have I not considered? Am I following the evidence, or am I protecting my assumption?" These questions are difficult because they require humility. They require admitting that our first impression may not always be correct. But changing our minds when new evidence appears is not weakness. It is a sign of good judgment. In any investigation, the goal is not to defend a belief. The goal is not to win an argument. The goal is to discover the truth. Because the truth does not need our protection. It only needs our willingness to follow where the evidence leads. And sometimes, the greatest breakthrough in an investigation begins with a simple realization. The answer we were searching for may not be the answer we expected. Every case tells two stories: the story of what happened, and the story of how people tried to understand what happened. Confirmation bias reminds us that the human mind is powerful, but it is not perfect. We all see the world through our own experiences, our memories, our beliefs, and our expectations. Those things can help us understand situations. They can also influence the way we interpret information. The challenge is recognizing when our experiences are helping us see clearly and when they may be shaping what we believe before all the facts are known. The Nolan Wells case reminds us why careful investigation matters. Questions matter. Transparency matters. Evidence matters. But above all, the search for truth matters. Because justice is not about finding the answer we want. Justice is about finding the answer the evidence reveals. The lesson of confirmation bias is not that people should stop asking questions. Questions are necessary. The lesson is that we must remain open to answers that challenge our expectations. Because the pursuit of truth requires more than confidence. It requires curiosity. It requires patience. And it requires the humility to admit that sometimes we may not see the full picture. At Felonies Uncovered, we do not just examine the events that make headlines. We examine the psychology, the decisions, and the human behavior behind the story. Because understanding how we think may be one of the most important steps toward understanding the truth. This has been Felonies Uncovered in Depth. Until next time, stay curious and keep looking beneath the surface.
You cannot defeat the truth. Behind every investigation is a story waiting to be uncovered, a trail of evidence, a search for the truth.